I've come to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it were already blazing. Fire is very powerful, it's beautiful, and it's mysterious. Perhaps this summer, you've had the opportunity to sit outside by a campfire and kind of watch the fire consume the wood and the smoke make its way up to heaven. Or maybe on a winter night, a chance to sit next to a roaring fire in a fireplace and feel like you're safe from the snow that is sometimes howling outside around us. Or maybe just to sit and look in the darkness at the flame from a candle and to watch the way that even a single flame can start to light up our darkness. And fire is also very dangerous. Every summer, as we watch the news reports that are now 24 hours on our smartphones and computers, we see reports of wildfires that are threatening homes, usually in the western United States. We hear stories of folks who've lost possessions and sometimes even life to fire. And many of us gathered here remember that day in December in 1995 when we stood outside on the other side of caution tape because our church had caught fire. And we remember that experience of seeing a place that we loved, where some of us had been baptized or married, a place where we celebrated every Sunday, fall victim to fire. And so Jesus' invitation in the gospel today might seem beautiful, and it might also seem to be a little bit much. It's pretty clear that our world is already on fire, and we know all too well the fires that are burning somewhat out of control. There's fires burning in the lives of our family members and friends, things that are wrong that we don't know how to fix, that we wish would go away, whether sickness or broken relationship, loss of a job. There's a political race going on in our country that seems to be taking up all of the time of the newscasters and seems pretty hopeless. And there's a sense of escalating mistrust and violence between police and those who are being policed. And maybe last night or this morning, you looked at the news and saw a gas station in Milwaukee on fire, as yet another police shooting had taken place and people had taken to the streets to protest. And then we come and read this gospel about Jesus setting the world on fire. And what is Jesus saying? Because our world is burning and it's hurting. And Jesus is talking about families being divided. And this might be really, really hard for us to hear. Like Jeremiah in the first reading, sometimes I find myself feeling like I'm at the bottom of a well and kind of starting to sink into the mud. When I was a college student, I remember one day playing Frisbee in the park. There was kind of this hippie guy that we played Frisbee with, and he had a beard and sandals, and for those who are checking, I did put on shoes this morning. He had this t-shirt as he threw the Frisbee that said, "Our God is a consuming fire." And it had just this kind of big blazing picture of fire on the front of the t-shirt, and the words were kind of superimposed over the flame. He wore that t-shirt every day. I think that was his excuse for not showering. But he was on fire. There was something about him and about the way that he lived and about the way that he wore that t-shirt that he knew what God's fire was doing in him and what God's fire was doing in the world. And God has come to set the world on fire and to set us on fire. Sometimes to light a fire in a place where the fire has gone out. Or maybe to reach in and stir up the embers when they've gone cold. Or even when we feel like our fire is burning, to look at us and smile and say, "That fire's far too small." And to heap wood on the fire and watch it blaze and rage and come to life. Our God lights our fire when our prayer is gone despite our best efforts. When we've forgotten how to fight for justice in our community, in our school, in our workplace, in our family. Or when our life, or the life of someone that we know, seems to have lost its meaning. Some of you will recall standing outside of our church on the Easter Vigil and watching that fire that God has lit start blazing. And Father Charlie or Father Bill will reach that Paschal candle into the fire and light it and carry it into the dark church. The first Easter Vigil when I was a priest, that was my job. I was pastor at the University of Portland in Portland, Oregon. This is a college run by the Congregation of Holy Cross, the group of priests and brothers to which I belong. And I'd carefully coached the altar servers. When we bring that candle to the doorway and lower the candle for everybody to come and light their small candles, make sure that you don't take the glass shield off the candle because the wind will blow it out. I think the altar servers were caught up in the moment looking at the fire, and as I lowered the candle, the shield was popped off by one of the servers, and the Paschal fire went out. So how do you like that? First Easter as a priest, and now the light of Christ has been gone out. I tried to remain calm and look to the altar servers and smile and, hey, why don't you run and get a lighter out of the sacristy? But fortunately, behind me, there was an old Holy Cross priest. He was 92, and he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a cigarette lighter. He was a regular pipe smoker, and he relit the Paschal candle. And he grinned and he looked at me and he said, "Light of Christ, kid." There's a way that God comes and finds us in the moments when our light has completely gone out and surprises us by relighting that fire again. And when that fire is lit, then everyone, like they did on that Easter Vigil, comes and lights their fire off of that fire. And the light comes and spreads through the church. Jesus knows, too, that fire can be dangerous. He warns us in the gospel today that it can bring division in our families and communities, and as we know all too well, even in our church. But Jesus also knows that fire is powerful, and it's mysterious, and it's beautiful. And so again and again and again, Jesus comes and lights that Paschal fire and sends that Holy Spirit and sends us a fiery baptism, giving life to our church, which, like this building, is built out of a fire. Jesus comes to us today and every day to set our world ablaze with love and faith and justice and hope, and invites us to nurture that flame burning in our hearts and to help set our world on fire.